Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and this is Movie Crap. This is my weekly movie news show where I talk about movie news or something involving movies that I would like to talk about. And this week I want to talk about Isao Takahata, who recently died this past week at age 81. And Isao Takahata was probably one of the most important animation directors of all time. He was a co-founder in Studio Ghibli. He was a mentor at one time, and then collaborator, and then sort of rival who ran the same studio with Hayao Miyazaki. He was appreciated in America, despite being one of the founders of Studio Ghibli. And him and Hayao Miyazaki really formed one of the great auteur-based animation studios of our age. As much as it's known for being Miyazaki's studio, it was really the team of the two of them, both being very promising animation directors and feature animation directors and television animation directors coming together to form this company. Even though Hayao Miyazaki put out a lot more movies, Takahata was kind of the emotional, artistic, experimental, crazy spirit of Ghibli. Isao Takahata is probably one of the filmmakers who I recommend the most to people, and often talk about how he is so underseen and undershown. Most Studio Ghibli series that play in theaters, they'll do Grave of the Fireflies, maybe Only Yesterday, but they're not going to do all of the Takahata films within Ghibli. And then there's all the films he made before Ghibli was formed, which he made quite a few actually. And I never felt like people really wanted to get as into him, and he's a really great director to go through his filmography. I did do that when I did a Studio Ghibli series. I went through all the films him and Miyazaki made before Ghibli and through all the films of Studio Ghibli. I think so much of his career feeds into Ghibli that without him and without Hayao Miyazaki, that studio just couldn't exist. Like, it needed the two of them. I think the modern animation studio is the studio of the animation auteur, and Studio Ghibli probably established that more than anyone. I mean, Takahata is probably the only animation director I can think of who lists Godard as an influence, and you could actually see it. He's not just, throwing that out there so dorks like me are impressed. He actually, you can tell, liked Jean-Luc Godard. And I think Isao Takahata was so interesting because his whole career, his whole arc, is that he wanted animation to be taken more seriously. He was very interested in it as a medium, and he wanted to expand that medium. And I absolutely think he did do that within his career. Isao Takahata's first feature film, Horus, Prince of the Sun, came out in 1968. It's actually going to have its 50th anniversary this year, and it was actually the first feature theatrically released animated film that Hayao Miyazaki would work on as well. Although it was a critical success with some people and had a big cult following, it did not do well. And sending Takahata and Miyazaki to work on TV for most of the 70s, really, except for the Panda Go Panda kind of shorts that played before, I forget which Godzilla film, but it played before a Godzilla film. And those were actually fairly well seen. But it seemed like he wanted, with Horus, Prince of the Sun, to do something more adult, do something more different, break free from what Disney was doing and more what was more considered entertainment for children. And Takahata really wanted to break away from that. He did that with Shay the Brat a little bit. I think that's more to capture the comic strip of it. It's Shay the Brat, which came after Panda Go Panda, was more of kind of a precursor to My Neighbor the Yamadas, but in more of a traditional kind of style than the experimental newspaper quality of My Neighbor the Yamadas. That's kind of, I'm not as into that one. But Gochu the Cellist, I think, is a really great one. Probably did much better in Japan. I don't really know if it got that much of a release here. But that's one of his more underseen ones that I would highly recommend that's pre-Ghibli. I think he really deserves a lot of credit for that. I think he deserves a lot more attention for that film, and it should be shown more. It has a very deeply beautiful quality to it, has a surreal quality to it, a real naturalistic quality. You can kind of see him becoming a real auteur, a real having his own directorial voice. The other films, Horus, Prince of the Sun, you don't really see that as much. It's kind of like its own kind of weird thing in 1968. But then when he does Gochi the Cellist, which I hope I'm pronouncing right, you can really feel that he wants to do things with animation that no one's being that patient. No one's doing a naturalistic style the way he is doing it. And of course, between that and Grave of the Fireflies, he did, help produce films for Hayao Miyazaki, those being Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and Castle in the Sky, which Castle in the Sky would be the first Studio Ghibli film. Nausicaa would sort of pretty much be, but not, but the studio wasn't formed then, so it in actuality wasn't. But it seems like Takahata loved being a mentor to Hayao Miyazaki. So much of Hayao Miyazaki and how he learned animation, and Takahata was sort of his older brother, 4 years older than Hayao Miyazaki, and really worked with him, and they were, they loved working together. I don't know as much they get along if you watch Kingdom of Dreams and Madness, but you can tell they had a camaraderie at that time. And then came Grave of the Fireflies, which I think is Isao Takahata's masterpiece. It is his one undisputed all-timer, which almost every great director should have or probably does have. And he made what Roger Ebert has called probably one of the greatest war films of all time. It really shows the real casualties of war, the forgotten, the people who didn't ask to fight, weren't in the war. And it also kind of shows a side of World War II that you don't often see. You don't see what happens in Japan. You don't see, how they didn't feel, these kids didn't know maybe what side they're on and how that country felt about World War II, and the tragic nature of that film, the heartbreaking nature of that film. When I did review that film, I watched it a couple times to really get into it, and it takes you to the kind of depths of humanity and the evil that we really do with war, the horribleness we do with war, and the casualties that we bring with war, and how that is never something that is really thought about, but it ruins their entire lives. And Takahata lived through the firebombing in Japan and really wanted to make a film incorporating that. And it's hard to explain how devastating the firebombing was, not even to get into also the atomic bomb and what America really did to Japan. But I think what Takahata does, and the cost of World War II, was something that Japan has dealt with in film. It's partly what Godzilla is from also. That tradition of being able to sort of talk about your pain. It's what Japan does now with films like Your Name and Shin Godzilla, about the tsunami and everything that happened with that. And I think what Grave of the Fireflies does is it just shows you the cost on the Japanese people, but on the Japanese children, and what the cost of this war, that they that they were forced into this situation in history, that because of these historical decisions their lives were ruined, and how the world kind of forgot about them, and that wasn't what the world was thinking about. If you watch that film, they're treated almost as the forgotten, and that they're not prepared to take care of themselves. And how Takahata explains those really human and really basic elements of humanity and of war are so eloquent and beautiful and so human. If you're not taking animation seriously and not taking it seriously as a medium before you saw Grave of the Fireflies, if you didn't after you saw Grave of the Fireflies, I don't understand you, because that is a film that isn't trying to be this fantastical, experimental, different film. He really makes a very natural, human, relatable film that will just utterly destroy you in terms of its heartbreaking and realness. And it's kind of one of those cinematic achievements that pushed past animation and just showed you that you could make a flat out amazing, wonderful and beautiful film that is not within the parameters of what you understand animation to be. In some ways, this was on a double bill with My Neighbor Totoro. And My Neighbor Totoro, it isn't traditional. I think it's very different what Miyazaki did with animation, but having a cute character, having a film with children, that's a lot more traditional. Grave of the Fireflies, it's like Takahata came to a point where it's like, what would I like an animated film to be? What would if I am a serious film goer and I would like, why don't we do a drama with children where they're trying to survive as they are left over and orphaned from World War II, and what they're going to do is just heartbreaking and depressing and real, and a side of humanity often that we don't want to deal with. Only Yesterday, I think, also deals with our memories and nostalgia in ways, and it's a really beautiful film, and it kind of caps off a part of his filmography that is more naturalistic and more human in certain ways. And often Takahata and Miyazaki are compared to Kurosawa and Ozu, and Takahata, I guess, being Ozu and Miyazaki being Kurosawa. And I guess in these films I agree with that, but I think when you get to Pom Poko, it just seems like the experimental side of Takahata's career really begins, and he really just goes full force into that. Pom Poko is obviously more known for being the movie with the raccoons with the testicles, but it is probably his most environmental film. It feels more Studio Ghibli-ish in terms of, like, if there is a genre of Studio Ghibli than the rest of his filmography, certainly. But then when you get to My Neighbor the Yamadas, which is experimental and family friendly, and, you know, the clips of it, I think you could watch that as a nice family movie night, but it's also experimental and weird at the same time. It's really amazing what he does with My Neighbor the Yamadas. When I saw that film, I was just shocked at how, like, weird and arty it was, but also was great at capturing a newspaper comic strip while also capturing a family. I mean, My Neighbor the Yamadas might be probably one of my more favorite achievements that Takahata did, because there's not a lot of directors that can do the achievement that My Neighbor the Yamadas is, and you can certainly undermine it and go, oh, that's just like some dumb family thing, I don't know, who cares. But it's like, if you've seen enough family kind of films, this is a film that gets to the natural kind of everyday side of family with personalities and everything like that. But he also gets weird with it. He also keeps it within the style of being a comic strip. Just really beautiful with what Takahata did with that film. And then he ended his filmography, his final film, The Tale of Princess Kaguya, which was by far the most experimental, switching between animation styles. And he spent about 14 years making it, which, you know, he really wanted to make, like, these kind of big directorial films. But also, you know, when you're the co-founder of a hugely successful animation studio, and, you know, your friends off making the big box office successes, you can, you know, make whatever the fuck you want. And Takahata seemed to like to do that. And I guess his final kind of film that he ever worked on was The Red Turtle, which came out about 2 years ago, and wanted to kind of he was considered the artistic producer, which I think, if anything, if Takahata was going to mentor the next generation and show where animation could go, I think that's probably one of the biggest things that he ever did, was that he helped train the future of animation, and he wanted to do something before he died. Clearly he died of lung cancer, unfortunately, and it seemed like he wanted to continue to mentor someone else the way he had with Miyazaki. Takahata is underutilized, is underserved, is never really given the respect that he does deserve. I think, you know, we should be talking about Only Yesterday, and we do talk about Grave of the Fireflies. He was even a music director on Kiki's Delivery Service. He did so much with his career, and not to even get into the TV work from Future Boy Conan to, you know, what he did with Lupin the Third in that series, the Heidi series, Pippi Longstocking. He did so much within his career, and he pushed animation to a point, and then sort of just did his own thing in such a beautiful experimental way. I think Takahata is one of the great filmmakers of our time, and it's very sad that we lost him. He's always been a director who I've wanted to champion and tell people to see more of his films, and even though I don't necessarily love every one, but I think probably my favorites would be obviously Grave of the Fireflies, Only Yesterday, My Neighbor the Yamadas I have a lot of esteem for, and Gochu the Cellist, and Horace Prince of the Sun, I think, are the ones that I would absolutely recommend. Panda Go Panda also. You can usually get a DVD that collects most of them, which is just, I think, Panda Go Panda and then Panda Go Panda, The Rainy Day Circus, I believe. And I would say go use this time when people are writing about him and people are talking about them. Not enough, frankly, for my money. I think he should be discussed quite a bit because of all he achieved in the studio he helped found, and what he did for both animation and for filmmaking is quite frankly astounding. He will always be one of the major figures in animation and filmmaking who really pushed the medium further than I think anyone really ever has. You know, I think he deserves more respect, and certainly he only got, I think, one Oscar nomination throughout his whole career for The Tale of Princess Kaguya, but I think he is a director who, what he achieved will be felt for years and years to come. And certainly most people will only know him for Grave of the Fireflies. I think his career was a lot more than that, but that film is so powerful and so important. If he's going to leave you with one thing, and for that to be the one thing that everyone puts a picture of, you know, before they write the article or the obituary, it's such a powerful film. It kind of shows everything he wanted to achieve in animation and how he pushed it there, whether the world was ready for it or not, because he knew he could show it to you and make you deal with these realities in animation and make you take it seriously as a medium and make you take him seriously as a filmmaker. And after that film, it seems like he had proved everything he needed to prove, but still kept going. And I think that's a sign of a truly amazing, great filmmaker that was Isao Takahata, and everything he did and the legacy he left behind is something that I think film and animation, both as mediums, will never truly forget. Alright, so that was Movie Crap. If you would like to talk about Isao Takahata, then comment below in the comments, and subscribe if you would like to. Also, this Movie Crap really would not be possible without Sean Key, who edited this and really even helped me definitely do one just about Isao Takahata. So I especially want to thank him, and please subscribe to his channel. And his info will be in the description of this video. And thank you so much for helping Movie Crap get back on its feet and helping transform and make this rebooted version. Really, a lot of the credit should go to Sean Key. And thank you for editing this as well as you did.